It was April, and outside in the dark, the rain whipped against the windows of our tavern, making a sound like muffled drums. What book are we reading, boys and girls?
My brother Sam's dead.
What chapter?
1.
What page?
1.
Are you excited?
Yes!
Okay, we were concentrating on our dinner, and everybody jumped when the door slammed open and banged against the wall, making the plates rattle in their racks. My brother Sam was standing there, wearing a uniform. Oh my! He looked proud. Sam, my mother said. We hadn't seen him since Christmas. Shut the door, Father said. The rain is blowing in. Ah, that's the way Father was. Do right first, and then be friendly. But Sam was too excited to pay attention. We've beaten the British in Massachusetts, he shouted. Who has beaten the British? Father said. Sam shut the door. We have, he said, with his back to us as he slipped the latch in place. The Minutemen, the D Lobsterbacks, marched out of Boston yesterday. They were looking for Mr. Adams and Mr. Hancock, and they marched up to Lexington. Some of the Massachusetts Minutemen tried to stop them there in the square, but there were just too many British. And they got through and went up to Concord looking for ammunition stores. What's ammunition? But the Patriots got the stores hidden mostly, and they didn't find much. And then, when they turned around and went back, the Minutemen hid in the fields along the roads and massacred them all the way back to Boston. Nobody said anything. They were silent and shocked. Why would you be shocked? What is shocked?
Because there's a gun pointed out.
And massacred means what?
Killed them all.
Yeah. I couldn't take my eyes off of him. He looked so brave. He was wearing a scarlet coat with silver buttons and a white vest and black leggings halfway up his knees. Oh, I envied him. He knew everybody was staring. He liked being the center of attention. He pretended it was just an ordinary thing, and he was used to it. I'm starved, he said, and he sat down at the table. I started out from Yale at 6 o'clock this morning and didn't stop to eat all the way. There were 7 of us at the table in the tap room. Mother and Father and me were there, and then there was the minister, Mr. Beach, who lived in Newton, but spent Saturday right here in Reading, so he could preach in our church early Sunday morning. Then there was a couple of farmers from Reading Center. I didn't know. And, of course, Sam. But still they all sat silent. I guess they figured that it was up to Father to speak first, seeing as Sam was his son. My mother got up, fetched a plate from the rack and filled it with stew from the iron pot on the fire. Then she drew Sam a pot of beer from the tap and put it all down in front of him. He was hungry, and he bent over his plate and began shoving in the food as fast as he could. Don't eat like that, Father snapped. Sam looked embarrassed, and he sat up straight. All right now, Father said, tell us the news in an orderly manner. Father had a temper, and I could see he was trying hard not to lose it. Whose point of view is the story told? Good, and what do we call that? First person. Good. How do we know that? What evidence? I. And he's describing things from his point of view, his experiences. Good. Sam dug his spoon into the stew and started to fill his mouth, but suddenly he realized if he began talking with his mouth full, Father would yell at him again. So he put the spoonful of stew back on his plate. Well, it's hard to tell it orderly, Father. There were so many rumors around New Haven last night that I thought it might be like that. No, it's true about the fighting, Sam said. Captain Arnold told us himself. Captain Arnold? Captain Benedict Arnold. He's captain of the governor's 2nd Foot Guard. He looked down at his stew. That's my company. He looked up and gave Father a quick, sort of scared look. That explains the fancy dress, I imagine, Father said. Captain Arnold designed the uniform. Never mind, tell the story. Well, the beginning was when the Lobsterbacks Well, by that I suppose you mean the soldiers of your king? Father said. He was still holding on to his temper. Sam blushed. All right, the British troops from the garrison in Boston. They marched up to Lexington looking for Mr. Adams and the rest, but they'd gotten away. Somebody signaled them from the church steeple in Boston. So when the British got up to Lexington, there wasn't anybody there except the Minutemen. And then the shooting started. Mr. Beach put his hand up to stop him. Sam. Who shot first, Sam? Sam looked confused. Well, I guess the British. That's what they said in New Haven. Who said? Well, I'm not sure. I guess it's hard to tell in a battle. But anyway, Sam, Father said, who do you think fired first? I don't know, Father. I don't know. But anyway, I should think it might matter to know, Sam, Father said. What does it matter? Sam was beginning to lose his temper the way he did. What right have the lobster backs to be here anyway? I thought it was pretty funny that he kept calling the British lobster backs when he was dressed in red too. All right, Mr. Beach said. Let's not argue the point. What happened then? Yes, sir, Sam said. So anyway, some of the men were killed. I don't know how many, but then the British went up on some place called Concord looking for ammunition stores there. They didn't find very much. They turned around and they started back to Boston. And that was when the Minutemen really peppered them. They chased them all the way back home. Quickly, Sam began to eat his stew before they had time to ask more questions. Darn it, that's rebellion, one of the farmers said. They'll have us in a war yet. Mr. Beach shook his head. I think men of common sense will prevail. Nobody wants rebellion except fools and hotheads. That's not what they say in New Haven, sir. They say that the whole colony of Massachusetts is ready to fight. And if Massachusetts fights, Connecticut will fight too. Finally, my father lost his temper and slammed his hand down the table, making plates jump. I will not have treason spoken in my house, Sam. Father, that isn't treason. Father raised his hand. And for a moment, I thought he was going to reach across the table and hit Sam. But instead, he slammed it down on the table again. In my house, I will decide what constitutes treason. What have they been teaching you at college? Mr. Beach liked peace. I don't think the people of Reading are anxious to fight, Sam, he said. Sam was nervous, but being Sam, he was bound to argue. You get the wrong idea from Reading, sir. There's a lot more Tories in this part of Connecticut than in the rest of the colonies. In New Haven, there aren't so many loyalists, and in some towns, there aren't any at all. Oh, Sam, Mr. Beach said, I think you'll find that loyalty is a virtue everywhere. We have had these things before. That vicious nonsense of those madmen dressing up like Indians and throwing tea into Boston Harbor, as if wetting a few hundredweight of tea would stop the mightiest army on the face of this earth. These agitators can always manage to stir up the passions of the people for a week or so, but it never lasts. A month later, everybody's forgotten it, except the wives and children of the men who have managed to get themselves killed. Sir, it's worth dying to be free. That made Father shout. Free? Free to do what, Sam? Free to mock your king, to shoot your neighbor, to make a mess of thousands of lives? Where have you been getting these ideas? You don't understand, Father. You just don't understand. If they won't let us be free, we have to fight. Why should they get rich off our taxes back in England? They're 3,000 miles away. How can they make laws for us? They have no idea how things are here. It made me nervous to listen to Sam argue with Father. I could see that Mr. Beach wanted to quiet him down too, before he and Father got into a real fight the way they sometimes did. God meant man to obey. He meant children to obey their fathers. He meant men to obey their kings. As subject of the Lord our God, I don't question his ways. As a subject of his majesty, George III, you should not question his ways. Answer me this, Sam. Do you really think you know better than the king and those learned men of the parliament? Well, some of those men in parliament agree with me, sir. Not many, Sam. Edmund Burke. Father lost his temper again. He banged his hand down the table once more. Sam, there'll be no more talk on this tonight. And he meant it. And Sam knew he meant it too. So he shut up and the conversation turned to repairs. Mr. Beach wanted to make to the church. I was glad too. It scared me when Sam argued with grown-ups like that. Of course, Sam was that way. Always shooting out whatever came into his mind and sometimes even getting hit by my father for it. Father had hardly ever hit me, but he hit Sam dozens of times, mostly for arguing. Mother always said, Sam isn't really rebellious, just too quick with his tongue. If he'd only learned to stop and think before he spoke. But Sam couldn't seem to learn that. My mother hated it when Father hit Sam for speaking out, but there wasn't anything she could do about it. And anyway, she believed Father was right. Children ought to keep a civil tongue in their heads. I guess he was right. Children are supposed to keep quiet and not say anything, even when they know the grown-ups are wrong. Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes I have trouble keeping quiet myself, although not near as much trouble as Sam. Of course, Sam was also almost a grown-up himself. He was 16. He'd been away at college for almost a year, so you wouldn't really call him a child anymore. I guess that was part of the trouble. He thought he was a grown-up, and he didn't want anyone to tell him what to do, except I could tell that he was still afraid of Father. But to be honest, I wasn't sure if Sam was right about the fighting anyway. It sounded right when he said it, that we should be free, and not to have to take orders from people who were so far away and all that. But I figured there had to be more to it than Sam knew about. Father had never gone to college the way Sam had, but still, I was pretty sure that he knew more than Sam. Father was a grown-up, and maybe Sam thought he was a grown-up too. As far as I was concerned, he was just my brother. He couldn't scare you the way Father could. Besides, it made me glad to have him home, and I didn't want him to get into a big fight with Father and spoil it. I just wanted him to shut up until dinner was over and we could go up to the loft where we slept, and I could lie there in the dark, snuggled up next to him, and keep warm and let him tell me stories about Yale and the pretty girls he knew in New Haven and getting drunk with his friends and his triumphs and his debates. Sam was a triumphant sort of person. He always had some victories to tell about whenever he came home from college. Mostly they were in debates where he scored telling points over his enemy, or whatever you call them. Anyway, he would say, and then I scored a telling point, Tim. He'd explain to me what the telling point was, which I really never understood, and then he'd say, Tim, it was a great triumph. Afterwards, everybody crowded around me saying, that was a telling point, Meeker, a real telling point. Sam couldn't boast about his triumphs to Father, or Mother, or Mr. Beach, or anybody like that, because boasting was pride, and pride was a sin. But he could boast to me about them because I didn't care if pride was, whether it was pride or not, they were interesting. And I guess most of his boasts were true. He was always bringing home some book in Latin or Greek with an inscription saying he had won it for some telling point he had scored. Of course, the inscriptions were usually in Greek, which I couldn't read, but I believed him. Boys and girls, I'd like you to go ahead and finish reading chapter 1. Find out if there's any more arguing at the table, and you will learn a little bit about chores to be done around the house. See how helpful Sam is with those chores.
How long is this?